So let me begin by asking both of you, which you diplomatically didn't touch on in neither of your speeches. What we have.
This is going to be tough.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, I go.
Don't leave me alone.
As we know, in the last 6 months or so, maybe starting in Finland at the meeting of the Ministerial Council of the Arctic Council, we have seen a new geopolitical dimensions being brought into the Arctic globally, which also has enhanced the status of the Arctic in the international media and elsewhere. So how do you think our countries, Finland, Iceland, the other Nordic countries, for example, should deal with this new geopolitical importance of the Arctic? I think it's the first time in the history of the Nordic countries that we are met with this challenge of being a majority of states within the Arctic Council and having all the most powerful countries of Europe and Asia, also a number of others, also entering this background. So that's really my question. How are you and your governments beginning to deal with this new geopolitical transformation of the Arctic?
Did you know, Antti, that he used to run a political TV show before he became a president? So now he's turning back.
This is the problem of
so,
having a young prime minister. He's always putting me to be of some kind of old guy who shouldn't really be in the party. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm just trying to
floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Well, I mentioned this issue very briefly in my speech, but very briefly indeed. And of course, this is a very big challenge because the Arctic Council has managed to be a forum where the everyday geopolitical conflicts have been kept outside of the room. And actually, that was something that Iceland very much was in favor of, because we have thought that it is very important to have a forum where you have not only the Nordic countries, but the big countries, Russia, the United States, Canada, sitting at the table, being able to leave the conflicts outside of the room and having a constructive dialogue about the Arctic. And I actually spoke about this morning with Mr. Rick Perry, who is here, because this has been our vision of the Arctic Council. However, when we see this geopolitical tensions growing and the challenges growing, I think it's definitely a need that we discuss this. Should the Arctic Council become a forum for hard security? Or should we have another forum for that? And I think actually Finland was actually trying to instigate a leaders' meeting of the Arctic Council, and I would be very happy to continue with their efforts, because I think we need that discussion. Our vision has been to keep those conflicts out of the room.
Yeah, I agree with Katrín about this question. I would say that the biggest issue for us as people on the Arctic area is to have peace here, and it means that we need to discuss about the big questions about the people of this area. And for me it seems that the best way to affect this situation is to handle it with so many people as possible. And I mean, in that case, European Union, European countries together. There is over 500 million people, and it is very well fed about economic. And I think that if we want together, we can affect the situation so that we can handle Arctic area so that here is peace in future also. I would say that the biggest threat to this area is the global warming, the climate change. And as I said in my speech, we need to do together so much as possible to avoid a situation where the temperature go over 1.5. And that's why in my government we decided that we try to reach 2035 carbon neutral society, and further, very fast after that, negative.
And I think I agree with Antti that the climate crisis is the biggest threat to the Arctic. And that won't be solved unless through dialogue.
So, can we have questions from the audience? Maybe we can get a little bit of light up in the hall. So, and the people with the microphones. So from here, I don't really see any hands up in the air.
There is one.
There is one there.
Okay, we need more light in the hall. So yes, this is better. Yes, indeed.
Yes.
So bring the microphone to people who have put up their hands. And say your name and don't make a statement and just ask the question.
My name is Katrín Jakobsdóttir from the University of Iceland. I'd like to ask the Prime Ministers whether it's not high time that we declare the Arctic a global national park.
Do you want to first?
I think it's a very good question. And in my opinion, the Arctic is a global area. It's not the private issue of us here who live around the Arctic. It is really an area that affects the rest of the Earth. And this idea would really harmonize very well with what we have been focusing in our chairmanship in the Arctic Council. We have been focusing on climate, marine environment, and of course the indigenous people. What do you say, Antti?
I will say that we can't forget that there is also values of economical values in this area, and here live people.
Yes.
And that means that we need to strengthen their position to live here also. And I think that in future, because of these economical values, it is oil, it is gas, that kind of things. And while we are trying to prevent the global warming over 1.5, we need to do something. We don't use these oil and gas areas, which is under the Arctic area, and that's why I think that not a park of nature, but I will say that we need high value, these nature values on this area.
Well, I see our time is up for this part of the opening. Let me emphasize for you with the whole in the sessions that where we will take questions later on. Please be very quick and stand up, and also you on the back, you also have the right to put the question. But let me thank both the Prime Ministers for making their opening speeches and answering these tough questions proposed by me and Mara. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.